Racist cop chokes black woman. Doesn't know an admiral is watching. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. Officer Ryan Miller, a young and seemingly unassuming police officer, had just finished a shift when he decided to make one last routine stop. He was new to the precinct, eager to prove himself in front of his colleagues, but deep down, he had a simmering frustration, one he hadn't fully acknowledged. As he drove through the dimly lit streets, his eyes landed on a car speeding past him. Without hesitation, he hit the siren. The car slowed, pulling over to the side of the road. Ryan's hand tightened on the steering wheel as he approached the vehicle. Inside, Vanessa Johnson, a black woman in her mid-30s, sat with her hands gripping the steering wheel, her mind racing. She wasn't speeding, at least not intentionally, but something about this stop felt wrong from the start. She could feel the weight of his gaze as he approached the driver's side window. Vanessa wasn't naive. She had lived long enough in this world to understand the subtle but deep-rooted discrimination that some officers carried with them. As the window rolled down, Ryan's voice cut through the quiet night. License and registration, he demanded, his tone clipped, authoritative. Vanessa hesitated for a moment, then slowly reached for her glove compartment. She felt her heartbeat pick up, her nerves telling her something was about to go terribly wrong. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. But Ryan wasn't having it. His eyes narrowed, and his jaw tightened. "You don't need to ask questions, just do as you're told," he snapped a little too quickly. Vanessa could feel her palms starting to sweat as she handed him the papers. But something about the way Ryan was standing, towering over her car, made her uneasy. His posture, his attitude, everything about him radiated an unsettling hostility. Without warning, Ryan's voice broke. The silence again. "Step out of the vehicle." Vanessa's heart sank. She had been in situations like this before, but never had she felt such an overwhelming pressure in the air. She didn't know what was coming, but she could sense that this encounter was about to escalate. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door and slowly stepped out of the car, trying to remain calm. Ryan didn't give her a chance to speak. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the front of the vehicle, his grip firm and unyielding. Vanessa's thoughts raced. What was happening? Why was he doing this? And then, as quickly as it had started, things took an unexpected turn. At that moment, a car drove by slowly, but it wasn't just any car. Inside, a man in his late 40s, dressed in a sharp military uniform, was watching the scene unfold. Admiral Nathan Brooks, a high-ranking officer in the Navy, was just passing through when he noticed the situation. He had been in the area on official business and decided to stop for a brief moment. As he saw the officer's actions, his eyes narrowed. Something didn't sit right with him. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he could sense the tension in the air. What he didn't know was that Ryan had no idea the Admiral was watching, and his next move would change everything. Vanessa tried to pull her arm from Officer Ryan Miller's grip, but it was no use. He was stronger, and his hold was firm. Every nerve in her body screamed to get away, but she remained still, trying to stay calm. The air between them was thick with tension, and she could feel the weight of his eyes on her as he forced her toward the front of her car. Her mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. What did he want from her? What was happening? She had never been in this situation before, and she had no idea how to handle it. Her hands shook as she tried to keep her composure. She knew better than to make any sudden moves. She'd seen the stories, heard the warnings. But this was different. This wasn't supposed to happen to her, not like this, not on a quiet street at night. She glanced up and saw the headlights of a car passing by, but it was more than just a passing car. Someone was watching. Admiral Nathan Brooks, a man of power and influence in the military, had noticed the scene unfolding in front of him. He wasn't sure at first what was happening, but something about the way Officer Miller was acting caught his attention. He had seen enough in his time to recognize when something wasn't right. His eyes narrowed as he continued to watch, his sharp military instincts telling him that this wasn't just a routine stop. Admiral Brooks wasn't one to interfere in everyday situations, but this one felt different. He could sense the injustice unfolding before him. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as he slowed his car to a stop, keeping a safe distance but close enough to witness everything that was happening. Ryan Miller's attention was fixed on Vanessa, and he didn't notice the man observing from the other side of the street. The Admiral was just a figure in the background, but he was more than just a bystander. He knew that he couldn't stand idly by. He had a responsibility, not just as an officer in the military, but as someone who understood the weight of authority. His thoughts raced as he watched Officer Miller's every move. He was a man used to making difficult decisions, to acting quickly when the situation called for it. And this, he knew, was a situation that called for action. As Vanessa was pulled further away from her car, her heart beat faster. She didn't know what was coming next. The adrenaline coursing through her veins made it hard to think clearly, but she knew one thing for sure. She needed to stay calm. Whatever was happening, she couldn't let fear take over. She needed to think to find a way out. She tried to speak again, but the words caught in her throat. "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice shaking. Ryan Miller's expression didn't change. He didn't answer her. He just continued to drag her along, his movements mechanical, as if he were following orders. But there were no orders. There was no reason for this. Vanessa knew that something was terribly wrong, and she couldn't understand why it was happening. She glanced quickly back toward the passing car, hoping that the person inside would do something. But there was no way to know if anyone had seen what was happening. Admiral Brooks had seen enough. He wasn't sure how he would intervene, but he knew that he had to do something. It was in his blood, his training. He had been trained to protect the innocent, to stand up against injustice. And what he was witnessing was nothing short of an injustice. His hand moved to his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. He wasn't sure if he should make the call just yet, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was unfolding right in front of him. Vanessa could feel the tension building in her chest as Officer Miller continued to push her forward. She tried to steady her breathing, forcing herself to stay calm, but everything felt out of control. Her eyes flicked to the side, scanning the street for any sign of help, but there was nothing. Just empty roads and the dim glow of streetlights. She felt a knot form in her stomach. Was anyone else seeing this? Did anyone else care? Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard the familiar hum of an engine. A car was passing by, but this time something was different. As it slowed down and stopped, Vanessa's heart skipped a beat. The figure inside the car was hard to make out at first, but as the headlights illuminated the man inside, she saw the uniform. He wasn't just any passerby. This man was in a military uniform, and his presence sent a shockwave through her mind. Admiral Nathan Brooks, a high-ranking officer, had just witnessed the entire exchange. His eyes narrowed as he observed the situation unfold. He had seen enough of the world's injustices, had been through enough himself, to recognize when something wasn't right. His instincts kicked in. As a man of power and authority, he had been trained to respond to these types of situations, though he had never expected to witness one like this on a quiet street. His grip on the steering wheel tightened as he watched Officer Miller drag Vanessa further away from her car. The Admiral could feel the weight of the moment. He didn't know who this woman was or why she was being treated this way, but it was clear that something was wrong. He wasn't sure what exactly he was witnessing, but he knew it wasn't right. Something inside him stirred. He had sworn an oath to protect and serve, to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. And that oath rang in his mind now. He couldn't just drive away. He couldn't just pretend that nothing was happening. This wasn't some distant news story on the television. This was real life, right in front of him. Vanessa's eyes shifted back to the officer as she tried to make sense of the situation. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, her voice shaking, the words escaping her throat before she could stop them. But Officer Miller didn't respond. His focus was entirely on her, his grip never loosening, his body language speaking volumes. Vanessa could feel the heat rising in her chest as the frustration and fear built up inside her. She had always known that this could happen, But it was different when it was happening to her. It felt unreal. She didn't know what would happen next, but she couldn't stay silent. She couldn't just let it happen. The Admiral watched from his car, his heart pounding. He had seen the look in the officer's eyes, the determination to control the situation, and something about it unsettled him. This was more than just a traffic stop. This was power at play. He wasn't sure what he could do, but he knew he had to act. His mind raced as he considered his options. Could he approach the officer directly? Should he call for backup? Whatever he chose, he knew one thing. This was a turning point. Something had to be done. As he reached for his phone, his thoughts were interrupted by a sharp movement from Officer Miller. The officer suddenly jerked Vanessa away from her car, forcing her to take several steps forward. The Admiral's instincts told him that now was the time to act, but he hesitated. The officer was close enough that any move on his part could make the situation worse. But Vanessa was helpless, and the injustice unfolding before him was impossible to ignore. Without another thought, Admiral Brooks made his decision. He would intervene. The time for hesitation had passed. Admiral Brooks didn't hesitate any longer. The moment he saw the officer's aggressive stance, he made his move. His car door swung open as he stepped out, his uniform crisp in the dim light. He moved quickly, his military training kicking in as he assessed the situation. The night air felt thick, and Vanessa could sense a shift in the tension, though she wasn't sure what it meant. She was still caught in the firm grasp of Officer Miller, her body tense, her mind racing. Her breath caught as she noticed the movement from the corner of her eye. It wasn't just the officer who was involved anymore. Someone else was approaching. She couldn't fully make out the figure, but the sense of authority was unmistakable. She felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone had seen what was going on. As Admiral Brooks approached, his footsteps were steady but deliberate. He kept his distance for a moment, watching carefully. He didn't want to provoke the officer. The last thing he wanted was to escalate the situation further. But what he was witnessing was already out of hand, and it wasn't going to stop unless someone stepped in. Ryan Miller, meanwhile, had his eyes locked on Vanessa, completely unaware of the Admiral's presence. He was focused on controlling the situation, ignoring any signs of hesitation or doubt. But his confidence was beginning to waver. Something about the way the stranger approached made him feel uneasy. The Admiral's voice cut through the night air, calm yet firm. "Officer, I need you to release her and step away from the vehicle." The words carried weight, and they immediately got Miller's attention. He turned sharply, his face hardening as he saw the uniform. The Admiral's presence was not something he had anticipated, and it threw him off. He wasn't used to being questioned like this, especially not in the middle of a routine stop. "This is none of your business," Miller snapped, tried to assert his control over the situation. But Brooks wasn't backing down. "It is my business when I see an officer abusing his power." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the implications of what was happening. Vanessa's heart raced as she heard the confrontation. She had been caught in a whirlwind of confusion and fear, but now, for the first time, there was a sense of someone standing up for her. She wasn't sure how things would play out, but she could feel the weight of the Admiral's authority. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Ryan Miller's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, he seemed to hesitate. He wasn't sure what to do now. He had been in control up until this point, but with this new figure standing in front of him, he was starting to lose his footing. The Admiral didn't move, his posture unwavering. He knew that he needed to be calm and assertive. His job wasn't to escalate things, but to ensure that what was happening in front of him was stopped. "You're in the wrong here," the Admiral said quietly, but the words were firm. Ryan's grip on Vanessa loosened just a little, but it wasn't enough. He was still trying to maintain control, and he was getting frustrated. "I said, step back," Miller growled, but the Admiral remained still, his expression calm but resolute. Vanessa, still caught in the tension between them, could hardly believe what was unfolding. This wasn't a dream, it was real. She wasn't sure who this man was, but in that moment, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. Someone was finally standing up against the injustice. The Admiral's voice remained steady. "You're not going to get away with this," he stated, and it wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. The words resonated deeply with Vanessa. For the first time that evening, she didn't feel entirely powerless. She was being seen. She was being heard. And that was enough to spark a small, but growing, sense of hope inside her. The tension in the air was palpable as Admiral Brooks stood his ground. His eyes remained fixed on Officer Miller, unwavering, while the officer's hand slowly loosened around Vanessa's arm. For a brief moment, it felt as though time had slowed and the weight of what was happening settled in. Vanessa, still caught in the turmoil of the moment, could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined that this would be how things would unfold, that someone would step in to stop it. But now that it was happening, she could sense the shift in power. The officer was losing control, not of her, but of the situation. Ryan Miller was no longer in charge. The Admiral's calm authority had unsettled him. Miller's body stiffened, his eyes darting between Vanessa and the man who had just confronted him. He was trying to regain his composure, but it was clear that he was struggling. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not in front of someone who held such authority. The silence between them stretched on. Vanessa remained still, her body tense, but her mind was racing. She couldn't fully process what was happening. She had been afraid moments ago, but now there was a glimmer of hope. It was as if the tide had turned in an instant. Finally, Ryan Miller spoke, his voice low and tinged with frustration. "I don't need you to tell me how to do my job," he said, but the words lacked conviction. The Admiral didn't flinch. "This is not about your job," he responded, his voice steady. "This is about doing what's right." Miller's jaw tightened. He wasn't ready to back down, but the truth of the Admiral's words rang in his ears. The woman in front of him wasn't just anyone. She was a human being, someone who deserved respect, not fear. The realization hit him harder than he expected. He had been so focused on asserting his power, on maintaining control, that he had forgotten the very thing he was supposed to be protecting. Vanessa. She wasn't just a target or a subject. She was a person, just like anyone else, and she deserved to be treated with dignity. The weight of that truth was like a stone sinking in his chest. For a moment, he stood there, unsure what to do next. Vanessa could feel the shift, too. The tension that had once felt suffocating began to ease, just a little. She wasn't sure if it was the Admiral's presence or the fact that she was no longer completely at the mercy of Officer Miller, but she felt a slight sense of relief. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She was still nervous, still uncertain, but the overwhelming fear had started to subside. The Admiral's voice broke through the silence once again. "I'm going to ask you one more time, officer," he said, his tone unwavering. "Release her and step back." This time, Ryan Miller hesitated. His grip on Vanessa's arm faltered. The pressure that had been building in the air finally started to break, and with a reluctant sigh, he let go. He stepped back, his face flushed with frustration and uncertainty. For the first time in what felt like forever, Vanessa was free from his grip. She stood there, feeling a rush of emotions flood her, but she didn't move. She didn't want to do anything that might make things worse. The Admiral remained in place, watching carefully as Officer Miller took another step back, his shoulders stiff, his eyes never leaving the Admiral's face. Vanessa glanced up at the man who had saved her. She didn't know who he was, but in that moment, he felt like her protector. She didn't say anything. Words didn't seem necessary, but a small, grateful smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. The Admiral nodded slightly, acknowledging her, but his attention remained on the officer. "You're lucky I'm not taking further action," he said, his voice low but firm. "But if you ever do this again, there will be consequences." Ryan Miller didn't reply. He simply stood there, the weight of the situation settling in. As the minutes passed, the tension in the air began to lift. The threat of further escalation was gone, but the reality of what had almost happened still lingered. Vanessa, still processing the events, turned back toward her car. She was shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was a mix of relief, anger, and disbelief. Her hand rested on the door handle, but she didn't open it just yet. She needed a moment to collect herself, to make sure this was all really happening. Admiral Brooks remained still, watching over her as she composed herself. The calm after the storm had settled, but for both of them, nothing would ever be the same. As the seconds passed, the street felt quieter than it had before, almost as if the world had held its breath along with them. Vanessa slowly turned her head, looking at Officer Miller, who was standing a few paces behind her now. His posture was rigid, his eyes still locked on the Admiral. She could see the conflict in his face. It was a mixture of frustration and something else, something deeper. For the first time, she noticed the cracks in his usual bravado, the uncertainty that lingered beneath his tough exterior. She didn't speak to him. She didn't have to. The tension in the air was thick, but it was no longer directed at her. The Admiral's presence had shifted everything. It was as if the storm had passed, leaving behind a calm but uncomfortable stillness. Vanessa's hand still rested on her car door, but she was hesitant to open it. Her fingers gripped the handle tightly, but she wasn't sure what to do next. She wasn't sure if this moment of safety would last, or if it was only temporary. The Admiral seemed to understand. He stepped forward slowly, giving her space, but his eyes remained on the officer. "I think you need some time to think, Officer Miller," Admiral Brooks said, his voice steady. "You'll have to answer for your actions." Miller didn't reply immediately. Instead, he just stood there, processing the words. His shoulders tensed again, but there was no more aggression in his body language. For the first time, Vanessa saw him as just another man, flawed and unsure, rather than the figure of authority he had been moments ago. She wasn't sure what to feel anymore. Relief? Anger? Confusion? Maybe all of them. She could still feel the weight of the officer's grip on her arm, and it was a feeling she wasn't sure she could shake off. But there was also something else now, something new. The fear that had once clenched at her chest was starting to loosen. It didn't go away entirely, but it didn't have the same hold over her. The Admiral's intervention had given her a taste of what it felt like to not be powerless. She slowly opened the door of her car, but before she got in, she turned toward the Admiral. She didn't know what she would say, but her voice came out steady. "Thank you," she said, her words simple but sincere. The Admiral nodded, a small gesture of acknowledgement. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "This isn't about me. It's about what's right." His words felt like a reminder, not just to her, but to himself as well. There was a moment of silence between them, one that didn't feel as heavy as before. Vanessa finally got in her car, still processing everything that had happened. She felt a pang of unease as she looked back at Officer Miller, still standing there, his eyes now cast downward. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but it didn't matter. She was no longer alone. The Admiral had given her a sense of security, even if only for a brief moment. As she started the engine and pulled away from the curb, she looked in her rearview mirror. Officer Miller remained there, standing still, but the street was quieter now. No more sirens, no more pressure, just the lingering weight of what had almost happened. For the first time in a long time, Vanessa felt a small measure of peace. It wasn't the end of the story, she knew that, but it was a start. She didn't know where it would go from here, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to let fear control her anymore. Vanessa drove through the quiet streets, her hands still gripping the steering wheel as her mind replayed everything that had just happened. The night felt different now, quieter perhaps, but also heavier. She had made it out of the situation, but something deep inside her still felt unsettled. It wasn't just the fear she had felt moments ago. It was the realization that the world she lived in, the world she had known her whole life, was more fragile than she had ever imagined. Even now, as she continued to drive, she couldn't help but wonder how many others had been in her shoes, how many people had faced the same kind of injustice without anyone stepping in to help. How many had suffered in silence, trapped by their fear, by the power dynamics that had been in place long before they ever stepped outside their doors. The thought weighed heavily on her. She wasn't sure where she was going, but that didn't matter. It was the first time in a long time that she felt like she had control over something, over herself, at least. That small spark of courage, fueled by the Admiral's intervention, had planted a seed of defiance in her. As she made a turn down a side street, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from her best friend, Jasmine. "You okay?" the message read. Vanessa stared at it for a moment, unsure how to answer. How could she explain everything that had just happened? How could she put into words the flood of emotions that had washed over her in such a short amount of time? She wasn't sure, but she knew she needed to talk to someone. So she typed back, "I'm okay, but I'm not sure I will be for a while." She hit send and set the phone down on the passenger seat. She wasn't ready to go into detail just yet, but talking to Jasmine would help. She needed to process everything before she could make sense of it. But even as she drove, the night seemed to stretch on forever. In the distance, the city lights blinked like stars. Everything around her felt surreal, as if she had been dropped into a world where the rules no longer made sense. She had been scared, but now, something else was beginning to bubble up inside her. Anger. Not at the Admiral, not at the officer, but at the system that had allowed all of this to happen. The system that had made it possible for someone like Officer Miller to believe he could get away with treating her like that. She wasn't sure what she was going to do with that anger, but she knew it was the kind of anger that could fuel change. As she turned another corner, Vanessa felt her phone buzz again. This time, it was a call from Jasmine. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Vanessa?" Jasmine's voice was filled with concern. "Are you all right? What happened?" Vanessa took a deep breath. She wasn't sure how to explain it, but she knew it was important. "I'm fine, really," she said, though her voice didn't sound entirely sure. "But something happened. A lot happened. I don't know how to explain it." Jasmine was silent for a moment. "Tell me everything," she said softly. Vanessa pulled over to the side of the road, her hands still trembling slightly. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. "There was a cop. He stopped me. It got really bad, Jasmine. I don't even know how it got that far." She paused, collecting her thoughts. But then this man showed up. He was in a military uniform, and he told the officer to let me go. He stood up for me. He made the officer back off. Jasmine's voice was quiet, but Vanessa could hear the disbelief in her tone. "What? Wait, you're telling me someone just stopped a cop like that?" Vanessa nodded, even though Jasmine couldn't see her. "Yeah, I don't know who he was, but he knew exactly what to do. He saved me." Jasmine was quiet for a moment, processing what Vanessa had said. "I'm so glad you're okay. But that's insane. I'm glad someone helped you. But it shouldn't have to be like that, Vanessa. None of it should have happened in the first place." Vanessa leaned back in her seat, her eyes focused on the road ahead. "I know. I just don't know what to do with all of this. I don't know where to go from here." Jasmine's voice softened. "I don't have the answers, but you're not alone in this. You've got me, and I'm here for you. We're going to figure this out together." Vanessa smiled faintly, feeling the warmth of her friend's words, but the uncertainty still lingered. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long time, she knew she wasn't facing it alone. The next few days passed in a blur for Vanessa. Each morning, she woke up with a knot in her stomach, still replaying the night over and over in her mind. She couldn't escape the feeling that something had changed, but she wasn't sure what that change was. The weight of the incident lingered, and although she was physically unharmed, it felt like the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. Her phone buzzed again, breaking her out her thoughts. This time, it was a message from Jasmine. "How are you doing? I've been thinking about you." Vanessa sat up on the couch, her phone still in her hand, staring at the words. She wasn't sure how to answer. She felt like she was stuck between two worlds, the one where she was just an ordinary person, trying to make it through her daily routine, and the one that had collided with her so suddenly. The one where power, authority, and fear all played roles in her reality. She responded after a moment. "I'm okay. Still processing everything, I guess." Jasmine's response came quickly. "Take all the time you need. I'm here for you always." Vanessa smiled softly, grateful for her friend's support, but the sense of confusion was still there. What had happened to her wasn't something she could easily explain, not even to herself. And as much as she wanted to move on, she couldn't. It wasn't just about the officer or even the man who had helped her. It was about everything that had led up to that moment. It was about the system that allowed things like this to happen. Vanessa knew she couldn't stay silent. She couldn't let this just be another incident, one that would eventually be forgotten, tucked away in the back of her mind. She needed to make sure that it mattered, that her voice mattered. As the week went on, Vanessa began to gather her thoughts, talking to others who had been through similar experiences. It was surprising how many people she knew who had their own stories that had been buried under the weight of fear or indifference. It was clear that the problem was much larger than just one encounter. It was systemic, but knowing that didn't make it any easier to bear. It made her realize how deep the problem went, how entrenched it was in the fabric of society. She couldn't stop thinking about the Admiral, either. She had never caught his name, and she had no way of reaching him. But his presence that night had left an indelible mark on her. The way he had stepped in without hesitation, without judgment, without any sign of fear. She wished she could thank him. She wished she could somehow let him know what a difference he had made. But the truth was, she didn't know where to start. The events had left her with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. She couldn't stay silent anymore. One evening, as she was sitting in her apartment, Vanessa stared out the window at the city below. The world seemed to keep moving, as if nothing had changed. People walked down the street, cars honked, the hum of daily life continued. But Vanessa felt different. She wasn't the same person she had been before that night. She had seen something she couldn't unsee, and it had changed her. She didn't know what she was going to do next, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her actions. She was going to stand up. She was going to speak out. It wasn't going to be easy, but she knew it was the only way forward. There was a fire growing inside her, one that hadn't been there before, and she wasn't going to let it die out. She opened her phone again and started scrolling through the contacts. Her thumb hovered over the name of a local community organization she had been meaning to reach out to for some time. Tonight felt like the night. Tonight, she was going to take the first step. She didn't know what would happen after that, but she was ready to make her voice heard, ready to fight back, not with violence, but with her truth. Vanessa's phone buzzed again. It was a reminder, a nudge to move forward. She stared at the screen for a moment, reading the message. It was from the community organization she had thought about reaching out to. "We're here for you. Let's talk when you're ready." She hadn't expected the message to come so quickly, but now that it had, she couldn't ignore it. It was a signal, a push that she had been waiting for, without even realizing it. She had been sitting there for hours, the apartment now bathed in the soft glow of the evening. The weight of the past week hung over her, but something had shifted in her. She wasn't the same woman she had been the day before. The fear that had paralyzed her was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet resolve, a knowing that her voice mattered, that her story mattered. She had seen firsthand what could happen when someone decided to speak up, when someone decided to act, and she knew now that silence would no longer be an option. With one last deep breath, Vanessa picked up her phone and dialed a number. The call rang a few times before someone answered. "Hello, this is Megan from the Community Action Center. How can I help you?" Her voice was warm and welcoming, and Vanessa felt a small weight lift from her chest. "Hi, my name is Vanessa Johnson," she said, her voice steady but still carrying the traces of uncertainty. I need to talk. I need to do something." Megan's voice softened, sensing the seriousness in Vanessa's words. "Of course, Vanessa. What's on your mind?" Vanessa paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She hadn't planned what she would say. She didn't know exactly how to begin, but she knew that it had to start somewhere. "I had an experience recently, a bad one, and I realized that I've been silent for too long about things that matter. About injustice, about fear. I'm not just talking about what happened to me, but about everything, how it's all connected." Megan was silent for a moment, allowing Vanessa to find her words. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't want this to be something that just fades away. I need to do something about it. I need to make sure that it doesn't keep happening to people like me, to people who have no voice." There was a pause, and then Megan spoke softly, but with purpose. "You're doing the right thing, Vanessa. Speaking out is the first step. It's not easy, but it's the most important step. You're not alone in this." Hearing those words, something inside Vanessa shifted again. She hadn't realized how much she had needed to hear them. She had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, but now she could feel a small sense of relief. She wasn't alone. I don't know what will happen next, Vanessa said, her voice tinged with a mix of determination and vulnerability. But I know that I have to do something. I can't just walk away. Megan's response was calm, supportive. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You're taking the right steps, and we'll be here to help you. You're part of a larger movement now, Vanessa, and that movement is stronger because of people like you. Vanessa closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those words settle in. For the first time, she felt like she had a place in this fight, like she was part of something bigger than herself. She wasn't just one person speaking out. She was one voice in a chorus of voices demanding change. Thank you, Vanessa said quietly, the words carrying more meaning than she could express. Thank you for listening. Anytime, Vanessa. Anytime. As she hung up the phone, Vanessa felt a sense of calm wash over her. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew she had made the right decision. She had taken the first step, and now she was ready for whatever came next. She was no longer afraid to stand up, to speak out, and to fight for what was right. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. She wasn't alone, and that made all the difference.